Okay, our next speaker is Emilia Nordlund. She comes from the Technology Research Institute of Finland, or VTT, and she is going to talk about a very fascinating topic in that sense, that cell factories and how we can produce future food with that kind of devices, whatever they might be then. Please.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Nice to be here. So my topic is cell factories today. So it's in a way a futuristic view on the food production and one way to make food in future. So while I'm presenting this topic at VTT, in the food solutions team and in the biotechnology team, we are thinking a lot that the future food production as part of our food economy strategy. So we are heavily focusing on the moving from the mass production of food to the smart food production, taking into account the well-being of the planet, but also the people. But now, really, when we think about the production of healthy and sustainable food ingredients, the cell factories are one option to come into the picture. Okay, there's something wrong, but I think there's actually no need to present any figures anymore, because I think it's pretty obvious based on the previous speakers that the population growth is there. Everybody knows the climate change is there. We have to mitigate it somehow, and also regards to the new food sources, we have to find new ways to produce the food in future. And what we have been thinking at VTT, and not only thinking but taking action already, is the cellular agriculture. So using single cell organisms in food production instead of traditional agricultural food systems. So what does that mean in practice? So when we use cells that can be considered as living factories with sophisticated synthetic capabilities, they can really turn simple feedstocks into complex products when we design them to do so. And what we have been identifying, the innovative advantages, is the benefits of cellular agriculture. I will show you in a minute that they can be, when we optimize the system, they can be very efficient. We can scale them up. We can control the system when we also say that they can be decoupled from the nature in a way that they are. We can build the food production in a very contained system, so we don't need to, in a way, of course we need to care where they are located, but they don't need to be in certain location. We can consider where to place the production, and then very well control what is going in, what is coming out, because it's a contained system. And of course, when we think about the current animal production or animal farming and use of antibiotics, when we think about cellular agriculture, there's no need to use antibiotics, so that's of course a clear benefit. And then when we think about animal welfare issues, we can consider that the cellular agriculture is also ethical food production technology. And it was nice to see the history in the previous presentation, that everything is done already. This is also done in the history, but why there is a lot of hype and discussion on this topic now is that the technology readiness level is now at the level that we can really make this happen. There is the synthetic biology, automation, robotics. Many things are now at the level that, in a way, it's feasible. We can think that we can scale up. There is a point to do it. So, and then we have the needs: population growth, climate change. So everything is now there that we really should think about this seriously, not just as something that's nice to know. so really when we think about the cell factories, it's very critical that we have the tools, the most up-to-date tools of the synthetic biology. We have the softwares, artificial intelligence, learning all the time. We have the automation in the measuring what's happening in the cell factories. We can adjust the process all the time by learning and testing. So it's really, in a way, smart cycle of doing things, and that makes it also possible that we can make it happen. And as said, this is nothing new really. Using the single cell organisms has been there. I think most of you know spirulina. Some of you might remember Pekilo, produced in Finland in 17th, and of course most of us know and have been using Quon. It's basically based on the cellular agriculture concept. And when we think about the previous examples, now of course when we think about natural resources, and if I come back to the Quon case, it's also fungal strain, but the production is mostly based on glucose. So when we think about the feedstocks for the cellular agriculture and the cell factories, it's very critical, of course, to think, okay, what do we feed to the cells? Is that sustainable? So one example of the VTT spin-off Solar Foods now starting their own business, they have been developing their system based on the carbon dioxide on the air, and then using solar power for the electrolysis and the hydrogen production that is needed for the biomass production. And based on their calculations, they have been able to claim that the biomass produced, it's more efficiently produced compared to the algae or the plants when we think about this, taking the carbon dioxide and using the solar power. So it's really, of course, critical to think about that what kind of nutrients we can feed to the cells to make the biomass or the proteins we would eat. And this is of course, one important thing is not that, okay, this is sustainable, or we can say that we use natural resources wisely, but then we have to think, of course, what is the composition of the biomass we produce. So this is now from the gas fermentation technology, the example of the biomass produced. And based on the preliminary data, it actually looks very good compared to the existing cases, spirulina and Quon, and the amino acid profile is also close to the recommendations when we think about the intake of essential amino acids. So there are signs that also when we use a very simple system in a way for making the biomass, still the product can be from the nutritional point of view a very good one. Then other way of thinking, we don't have to think always about the microbial biomass. We can also think something else, and what we have been also looking at VTT has been the plant cell cultures, and typically the plant cell cultures, this tissue or cultivation have been targeted secondary metabolites for pharmaceuticals and cosmetic industries due to the very valuable phenolics. But we have now, when thinking broadly the whole cellular agriculture concept, looking into the whole biomass of the plant cells. So, and we have found that they are actually pretty interesting from the nutritional point of view when thinking about the dietary fiber or the protein content. So it's also very interesting approach in the cellular agriculture. And of course in Finland, if we think about, let's say, lignonberry or bilberry plant cell culture, it doesn't make much sense. We can go to the forest and pick the berries, but if we go to the Hong Kong or Beijing or somewhere where it's not that obvious that you just go to the forest and pick the berries, so I think there is a lot of potential also in other areas than not maybe in Finland when we think about, for instance, the plant cell and berry cell culture technologies, and we have been also thinking that doesn't need to be always the industrial scale factories that produce these products, but you can also make your own berry berry cell jam at home if you wish. So there is also a potential for, in that way, to make the consumer closer to the food production. And I said already then about this that it's very important to think also what is the feedstock for the cell factories. So one approach is what we have been thinking also at VTT is that we can use very simple or raw feedstocks first for the first cell factory to produce the biomass, and then we can utilize that biomass as a feedstock for the next cell factory that can produce higher value ingredients. And we can say that, okay, let's say this is chicken, and we have the chicken feed, and then the chicken is producing the egg, and then we will have the protein here. Let's say the egg ovalbumin, for instance. So it's in a way the same process, but we can play with the cells when very much simplified here. So those examples were about using the whole biomass, either the microbial biomass or the plant cell biomass. But then, of course, when we think about these more or added value ingredients, functional proteins, nutritionally valuable proteins, the cell factories can be used also for the recombinant protein production. And this is also nothing new. It has been done for decades, the protein production in microbes. And there are many strains that have been developed and optimized for that use. But the more new, I would say, the new thing is to do or to use the strains for the food protein production. And at VTT we have been working also in history several years with enzyme production, and we have a lot of knowledge on the Trichoderma roesel fungal strain, and that's already a well-known host to produce recombinant proteins. And in that way, why we have been looking into that is because it's producing in a way food ingredients, or not food ingredients but food additives already, because it's used as an enzyme producer, and food industry is all the time using enzymes, and this strain has already the GRAS status when following the US regulations. So in that way it's already close to the, let's say, food grade thing. But now instead of production of the enzymes that are used in the food industry, the aim is to produce the food ingredients. So in a way that then they will be in a higher concentrations in the food products. And this is very well scalable. Maybe the number doesn't tell you a lot, this 110 grams per liter, but when we talk about the enzyme production in industrial scale, they are tens of thousands of liters, these bioreactors, so it's a huge scale. And then when we multiply it with this figure, you can imagine the number of grams we can produce. So then we have been thinking the chicken and egg question, that is it relevant anymore when thinking the whole cellular agriculture concept. And I just want to give you some reasoning why we have been thinking about chicken and the egg proteins. At least I didn't know this before we went into this topic, that really the fact is that 3 out of 4 birds on the planet are chicken. So I think that's a pretty massive number to me, and somehow sounds crazy that people are then using this of the whole birds on the globe. And then when we look at the numbers of how much eggs are produced in global, this is also a very huge number, and 1/3 of this number is actually going to the ingredient production. So we are not using the whole eggs, but we make something out of the eggs, and then we use that. And almost all food industry uses the eggs. So there is a lot of applications that needs eggs in the production. And the nutritional and technological value of the egg protein is very high, so it's a very important protein in many products. And here you can actually see, if you don't believe me, by the bird number, the egg protein, it's really dominating the protein ingredient market globally. So it's a big business. So based on this background, we have been thinking that, okay, we took the ovalbumin gene from the chicken, we transferred it to the Trichoderma roesel production host system. We fed nutrients and chemicals, water, some energy, and then we applied downstream processing to get the pure protein out of the cell factory. And of course, then when we optimize this, the target is that we can recycle water, use green energy, and so on. But this is now the simplified system. And we were pretty successful. It's not the 110 that I showed previously yet, but this is very first trial. We were able to produce 4 grams per liter, and the functional testing showed that we can foam. So this is now the egg white protein. Egg ovalbumin means the egg white protein. So we were able to make the egg white foam, and this is now the gel. The color comes from the culture medium. It's not fully purified, but we can say that the scrambled eggs structure is there. So it's really functional with what we can. It's the same stuff that the chicken produces, or that is present in the egg. Okay, then we have been thinking that this is cool, yes, and we should scale up, of course, and there is a lot of potential. But we have been thinking that, of course, now when I also presented in the beginning that we can design, and we can use artificial intelligence, and we can put the genes in the strains, and we can produce the proteins. But this is also a tool that in the cell factories we can also design the proteins a bit. Of course, there are allergies and there are still lack of certain functionalities. So when we think about the health and well-being of the people, this is of course again a bit more futuristic thing, but basically the tools are there that we can modify the proteins to decrease the allergenicity or improve the nutritional properties and so on. And of course now we have made trials with only a couple of dairy proteins and the ovalbumin, egg ovalbumin, but of course basically it's possible to produce other proteins as well, whatever is needed. So just to sum up, as said, this is in a way not something radically new. There are already examples on the markets. It's of course there are risks, but I think it's handleable so that we don't design too much, or it's done in a controlled way. And of course, very critical part when we think about this pretty disruptive things is to tell and educate people, general public, so that it's not something scary, but it can be in a way normal food, and there's nothing critical. Of course, the GMO issue comes, and this is for sure GMO, but this is really something that we have also paying attention at VTT, that how can we talk about this issue and explain to the people that what's the concept, and this is, we would say, of course, the biggest issue here to bring things to the market, but luckily there are the startups and the business, some companies in US also doing the work, and there are, in a way, it's not only us, there are actually many. This is a very, let's say, active field at the moment, so I believe. And I, as a scientist, although I'm thinking futuristic things and want to do these radical things, but I must say that as a food scientist, this has been something that I was maybe a couple of years ago still thinking, well, no way. But now it's moving so fast that it's amazing how fast these things happen. So that's why we have been also disseminating this issue at VTT for Finnish companies as well, that this is so active area, and we believe that it will also move fast. Of course, the regulation will limit to some extent, but there are all the things are now there, and the need is there. So should be, and we are in Finland are good. We have the pieces, so we should move also to do things and business with this approach. But this was my talk. So any questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you, Emilia. Amazing stuff. So any questions? There you go.
Yes, I'm very interested in the when you have recombinant cell factory, so to say. Then when you do the purified protein ingredients, I suppose those are technically not regulated as GMOs in Europe. They can be sold as just any food. What about the whole cell, say berry cell? Will those be unmodified, or are they generally? Do you need to change them to make them efficient for the? So would they be GMOs?
Yeah, well, no. For sure, it's novel food. So that I know. Of course, it's in a way. I don't know. Maybe it's not GMO, but it's for sure novel food. Because basically, if you just cultivate a strain or the plant cell, you take the totipotent cell and then you start cultivating. It might be the original from the original plant or the original microbe, so it doesn't need to be changed unless we want to increase the protein content. Yeah. But thus far, the ones we showed, it's not GMO.
It's not.
Not.
So you should be able to sell it in Europe.
Yeah. Yeah, but novel food regulation, we should go for that, and all the safety testing and toxicity testing should be done.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Emilia. It's brilliant. You say the consumer acceptance is the biggest challenge. I understand that because it's perceived as not natural. But then again, I think, like what happens behind the scenes of like the meat industry and whatever is also, pretty unnatural. But I think one of the biggest challenges is how do you get the industry to accept it? Like, for instance, how close are we to getting a bioreactor into a dairy farm, for instance? So the actual farmer now has a new kind of business in a declining market with liquid milk. The potential for the dairy farmer to actually put that bioreactor in his farm and start to produce cell-produced milk, I think, is actually the biggest challenge out there. It's actually for the industry to accept it, to start to kind of experiment with it. Do you agree? Or do you think that, how far are you with that kind of?
Yeah, I agree. It's of course a challenge, and of course there is a lot of good feedstock for the cell factories in the farms and in the nature in Finland. But of course we think that the easiest way to go on to market is the enzyme producers, or who already has, because the investment is already there. They have all this, who are producing the food grade enzymes. They have all the facilities to do the things, and the scale is already huge. So in that way, I think it's the easiest way probably to go on with this.
Yeah, because I think to get something in the consumer's hand, you've also got to get something to happen a little bit further down the value chain, right? So you've got to get a farmer or a producer or an industry to actually produce something first.
Yeah. Yeah, but this is also what we have been discussing with the industry, that the consumer acceptance comes from that
So
group as well.
Question
a question from I'm automation engineering background, and because the system is full of technology and software, how you see the cybersecurity? How it is? How you see the risk on that side?
Yeah, so the question was about the cybersecurity and, in that sense, the digital threats to this kind of a food system.
Well, of course, it's not like this that the cells will produce the proteins, and there needs to be, of course, the quality control in the product. So in that way, although somebody would go and disrupt or challenge what the cells produce, but it's in a way not, I don't see it as that big challenge, because there needs to be the quality control that is in the food industry all the time, that they will check that the product is what it should be. So in that way, I think it's pretty easy to tackle then that nobody would produce any harmful things into the product.
Thank you, Emilia. We need to move
Yeah.
on. And before, yes.